Hello, and welcome to the Intermediate JavaScript Lesson 5. Let's get started. All right, we're going to start off with some review. What are parameters and how do you use them? You can pause the video and come up with the answer yourself. What are parameters and how do you use them? Parameters are things you pass into a function, and they can be any type of variable from integers to strings to even arrays, which we will learn about later. And you can use them inside of the function, but you can only use them inside of that specific function. All right, question number 2. How do you declare and use a function? This is an example of how you can declare a function. You can var and then function name, set it equal to a function. You can put your parameters and then you write your code and make sure to use brackets and the semicolon. And then to call it, you name it, function name, or whatever it's called, and then put inside of the parentheses, you put your parameters. All right, and lastly, how do you make a function give you a number or string or any other variable? You can return, you do at the very end of your function, you do return, and then whatever variable it is. And then, of course, a semicolon. All right, we're going to continue working on our apple catcher project. So today we're going to learn about arrays. We're going to make a new drop apples function, and then we're going to make a restart apples function. All right, let's get started. So let's just review the variables that we know right now. So we have Boolean, a string, and an integer or int. We're going to learn about a new type of variable. Okay, we're going to do a discussion. You can just think about this on your own. If we wanted to make multiple apples fall on the screen at once, how many variables would we need? Why would having an x and y variable for every apple be a bad idea? Hint, what if we had 10,000 apples? Yes. You see, if we had 10,000 apples, then that means that we would need 20,000 different variables, which would not be good. So instead, we can use arrays. Arrays lets us store multiple values inside of a singular variable. If we had arrays, then we can have an array for the x coordinates and an array for the y coordinate, so we'd only need 2 variables instead of 20,000. Now this is an extreme example, but this is what arrays can be used for. And arrays can store billions of values if we wanted them to. So let's learn how they actually work. Think of arrays like a row of lockers. Each locker can store a variable as long as every variable is the same type. So in this case, we have an array of strings. And as we can see, I set it up like a locker. So in the first locker, there's apple, then banana, orange, pineapple, blueberry, and watermelon. We use indexes in arrays to distinguish the different parts of the array. So the first part is called index 0. We start with 0. Then the second part is index 1, and so on. This is how we would make an array with specific values. We can do var array and then set it equal to, inside of rectangular brackets, we can put the first variable, a comma, the second variable, and as many variables as you want, and then remember to end it with a semicolon. How to modify arrays. You can do array name dot push value, and it adds a value to the end of the array, and it grows it by 1. So it would add one more locker and one more value to the array. Array name rectangular bracket index is equal to value. This is how we can store and edit a value, we can replace the value inside that specific index with a new one. If we do arrayname.length, it returns the number of lockers or different indexes inside of the array. And lastly, arrayname.toString, this just returns a string of all the array values separated by commas. So it's useful for debugging. But this one, array name rectangular bracket index, is the one that we're going to be using a lot for our project. All right, we are going to now work on your Apple game. So go ahead and pull up your Apple game from Khan Academy and let's get started. All right, so we're going to have 3 apples in our game. You can change that number later, but for now we're going to have 3. And with the power of arrays, we only need 3 different array variables for x, y, and speed instead of 9. So here's how we can do it. We can do var apple x is equal to, and then these are going to be the different x coordinates, starting x coordinates of each apple. And the way apple y and apple speed will work is also going to be very, very similar. You can try to come up with what you want that to be on your own. Try to keep speed in between from 1 to probably 4 or 5. We don't want the apples to go too fast. Think, what does each number in the array represent? Each number inside each array represents a specific apple. So the number 20 would be the x-coordinate of the first apple. 100 would be the x-coordinate of the second apple, and 200 would be the x-coordinate of the third apple. All right, we're going to go over an answer. So this is what it can look like. We have each indexes different x, y, and speed. Each apple's x, y, and speed. This is an example of what numbers you could do. Just try to keep the numbers inside a specific range. You don't want the apple going too fast or too slow, and you don't want the apple to be off the screen. All right, now, since we learned about arrays, it's also critical that we learn about for loops. For loops are very important in coding. This is how it works. So we use the word for, then in parentheses, we make a new variable called I. This is the incrementing variable. Then we have the limiting part of the for loop. In this case, the incrementing variable I cannot exceed 99, or pretty much it can't be equal to or more than 100. You can change this number to any value, and you can set the incrementing variable to start at any value. It doesn't just have to be 0 or 100. And then lastly, we do the incrementing variable plus plus, which means it adds 1 every single time the loop repeats. So the way it will work is the incrementing variable will start at 0. It will run the code inside of the for loop, and then it will increase the incrementing variable by 1, so then it will go to 1, and it'll keep doing that until this part is false. Then it will stop, and that will be when I is equal to 100, because then it is no longer less than 100. All right, so now we're going to make a new function that creates the animation of these 3 apples falling. We will call this inside the main draw loop. All right, the first steps. We're going to declare and make the new function inside of your code. So go ahead and do that. You can pause the video. Next, we're going to add a for loop inside. You can use the incrementing variable I. This will loop once for each apple we create. All right, so once you have done that, we are going to now add code inside of the for loop. So we're going to use our 3 arrays to get the values of the apples x, y, and speed, we can use array name, rectangular bracket index to get these values. And inside of index, we are going to use I. This number will increase as the loop repeats, like I said before, and I will distinguish the different apples as we can look back over here. Index 1, when I is 0, it will be these three values, 300, 0, and 1. Then the second one will be index 1, which would be 100, negative, 50, and 2, and so on. All right, so we want to make the apple fall, so we can increase the y coordinate. So that's how we do it. We have apple y, which is our array. Then we would put I inside the rectangular brackets. And then we add, what are we going to add to it? We're going to add speed. This is how we're going to make the apples move slower or faster, because the larger speed is, the more distance the y coordinate will move, making the apple appear to fall faster. So go ahead and think and write what you think is behind this question mark block. All right, the answer was apple speed, or whatever you named your apple speed array, and then with the index I. All right, we also need to now draw the apple, and this is where parameters come in. We need two parameters, but what are they actually going to be? You can look back at your draw apple function to see what we need. And we have another hint, we need arrays. So you can pause the video and write this line inside of your for loop. All right, here's a hint. The first one, we need the x coordinate, and the second one, we need the y coordinate. But we can't just use x and y, we need to use the arrays. So the answer is going to be apple x and apple y with the indexes. All right, now we need to make the apples reappear. After you draw the apple, we need to add code so when the apple falls off the screen, it will call a new function called restart apple, which will bring the apple off the screen and put it back to the top. And this will also change the x coordinates, and we will use random, and we will randomize it. You can go ahead and try all of this out right now, but we will walk through how to do it. All right. So this is our function, restart apple. So we have the y coord, the x coord, and the speed, and we're going to set it to a random min-max. We want to make sure that min and max should be correct values. So for example, if the min is too low for the x coordinate, or the max is too high, then the apple might appear off screen, which would not be good. All right, go ahead and try all that on your own, and then if you're stuck, I will reveal the final answer. So first, we're going to have our for loop, and we're going to limit the number of times it's going to loop to 3. So it will loop once for 0, then it will loop for I is equal to 1, and then it will loop for I is equal to 2, which will be 3 times because we have 3 apples. Then we're going to add the speed. We're going to draw the apple. And finally, if the y coordinate is more than 400, we're going to restart the apple. And this is our restart apples function. Remember, you can use any values that you want as long as the apple is on the screen or not too fast or too slow. This is just an example of what you can do. All right, if you want to go ahead, you can go ahead and do lesson 6. And in lesson 6, we'll also go over the scoring system a little bit. All right, save your project. And we have office hours. And that is today's lesson. Great job. All right, bye.